What's up, guys? It's your man, Donovan Sharp, and welcome to the 215th edition of TSR Live, your daily dose of Red Pill truth, wisdom, and awareness. We are, of course, brought to you in part by Happy Hippo Herbals. Go to happyhippoherbals.com for the highest quality kratom on the planet. All right, well, let's get to it, man. My guest today is, of course, one of the, we consider him to be one of the founding fathers of the Red Pill. He's definitely one of the most influential figures in the Manosphere. Of course, his website, therationalmale.com, is, world renowned for better or worse, I guess if we call it. He's written books, The Rational Male, Positive Masculinity, and Preventative Medicine. All of those are original titles. I am speaking, of course, of none other than my man, Rollo Tomassi. Rollo, how you doing tonight, man?
Hey, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me back again. I guess this is our This is number 2, right?
Yeah, man. This is the second time around. And I remember the last time, actually, this is number 2.5, because you and I did that roundtable discussion with Anthony Johnson and Carlos and all that. So that was good. Listen, Shamari Henry says in the chat, no introduction needed. They're like, Donovan, shut the fuck up. We want to hear Rollo talk. But yeah, definitely thank you for coming on with us tonight. Sure. Listen, I mean, obviously you're well respected in the Red Pill community. And normally when I do these shows, I'm not married, nor do I have kids. But you, being who you are married and you have children. And we talk all the time about fucking sluts and slaying hoes and this and that and the other. But a man gets to a point at a certain age, or maybe at a certain point in his Red Pill development, where that's not such an attractive lifestyle. And I'm sure you get a lot of correspondence and emails from viewers and listeners that say, hey, Rollo, how do I handle myself in a Red Pill marriage? What do I do once I walk down the aisle? So just give us your thoughts in general on the difference between a Red Pill long-term relationship and a Red Pill marriage.
Well, I think the first thing that you need to sort of make a distinction from is that when it comes to the Red Pill, when it comes to understanding intersexual dynamics, there's a lot of guys who want to just be strictly one side or the other. They want to say, well, Red Pill and game is just for the single guy, the young single guy who's out there, trying to increase his leg count and trying to, basically solve his problem. And his problem is that he wants to get laid, right? And then you have the guys who say, if you decide you want a long-term relationship, or if you decide you want to go anything further than that, well, then that's not Red Pill anymore. Or you just decide, like, if you ever decide that you want to be married, then that's a blue pill decision. And in some respects, I can understand that today, because marriage is such a it's such a risk now. And when I got married, 21 years ago, it was a different situation than it is today. You have to understand also the age of marriage right now for most guys ends up being about 27, 28 years old right now. I think it might be even older than that. I always advise guys that if they want to get into a long-term relationship, to wait until after they're 30. And I'll explain why that is later on, but I think that, men need time to mature. They need time to sort of build themselves up into, understanding who they're going to be. And I really think just to be fair to yourself, you really need to give yourself the time to mature fully until you can get into your sexual market value peak as a man. And I've always said that that's right around, 34 to 36 years old, somewhere in that vicinity. But I think that defining the Red Pill as one or the other, I think that's really kind of narrows the scope, and it really is sort of a tunnel vision. If you see Red Pill only as going out and applying it towards game and applying it to get laid, well, more power to you. That's how most guys get started. That's how they want to, carry that over into solving a problem. And that problem is usually, how do I find a girlfriend? How do I get laid? How do I, spin plates? And the Red Pill, of course, has that down pretty well. After that, there is, what comes after that? What comes after your spinning plates? What happens if you decide that you want to stick it out with one girl? What happens if you decide that you don't want to stick it out with any girls? I think that the Red Pill can apply to so much more than just one aspect of intersexual dynamics. And so we get in these conversations of, how do you apply the Red Pill, and how do you apply, your understanding of intersexual dynamics to a long-term relationship. And I really think that the red pill and understanding the nature of women and understanding the nature of men is applicable to not just, staying, single, but also to, in a married relationship. And a lot of guys hit me up and they say, how do you stay in a relationship? I've been married 21 years and I have a really, successful marriage. As far as, the way I would define success, I would say it is. I think a lot of guys, when I was, my wife actually came with me to the 21 convention and I introduced her to quite a few people. And I think a lot of the guys there, had an impression that, that I've got a pretty, I got it pretty well,
Yeah, listen, Rollo, I'm just going to cut the bullshit here. A lot of guys said your wife was hot. Let's not be humble here. Rollo has a hot wife, for the record.
Yeah. Maybe someday I'll post a picture of her. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I think that the red pill and understanding intersexual dynamics has a lot more than one application. I think that it's applicable to a long-term relationship. I think it's applicable to marriage. I think that, an understanding is applicable to dealing with your mom and dealing with an aunt or a niece or your daughter or, the women that you might have to work with at work. So it's not like you're going to go and, maybe you don't want to go out and score with your female boss, but you can have a better working relationship if you understand, what it is about her that makes her do certain things. And the same thing really goes for your wife as well. Now, I also attribute the success of my marriage to my having been red pill and internalizing that as, part of who I am. And, just making that, putting that as sort of, a part of my personality and becoming that. It took me a while to do that too. People always ask me, Rollo, when did you unplug? And really I unplugged. If I had to pick a moment, it was when I was dealing with this ex-girlfriend of mine who was really a borderline personality disorder situation. And really, asking myself questions and looking for insight within myself that I simply didn't have the answers for at that time. And I picked up a book called Why Men Are the Way They Are by Dr. Warren Farrell. And I don't necessarily look to him as sort of like the guru who woke me up, because we're talking about like the early 90s, maybe the mid 90s when this was happening. But it wasn't sort of an awakening for me to that, sort of told me, how women's, their psyche and how their mentality was working. And remember, this is before I had a degree in behavioral psychology. This was before any of this stuff. In fact, when I got my degree, and or I should say when I was studying, I came across borderline personality disorder in the DSM, and it was scary to me that was exactly what I had been experiencing probably about maybe 10 years prior. And it was spooky, but that was my awakening point. And being with the woman who would be my wife sort of kicked my ass in the right direction, I think. I was non-exclusive with her, and by the time I'd got out of the relationship with the borderline personality disorder woman, I had decided for myself that I wanted to live a different life. And I was waking up and I was having a red pill like awakening then. I just didn't know it. I mean, we didn't call it red pill back then. It was, just sort of coming to terms with reality, I guess. But I would definitely attribute what I know of intersexual dynamics as the foundation of a healthy marriage and the success of my marriage, for sure.
I've actually got a couple of comments here. Be Real says, don't do it. Women are evil. Heathen Deluxe backs him up. He says, marriage, perish the thought. They are echoing the sentiment of a growing number of men.
Right.
Listen, let's call it what it is here. When men get married, we have everything to lose and almost nothing to gain based on the model now. Women have nothing to lose and almost everything to gain.
Right.
How accurate is that, or are we just being too meat-headed about this? Because we know not all women are evil, but by the same token, a compelling case can be made for that.
Well, let's look at it this way. Just what you're talking about and what these guys are talking about is 100% true. Okay, I'm a guy who has a very good, very successful, very loving marriage. Okay. That's why I always tell guys, do not use my marriage as a blueprint for you, what could happen for you. This is what this is what it could really be like for you. Don't think that for a second. And I have told guys this from day one. I can show you every single post I've ever written about marriage or about my, whenever I've had to use myself as an illustration. And I rarely do that. But when I do, I always put the caveat in there about don't look at my marriage as if it's something that you're going to replicate, because it's not. It's certainly not today. And yes, I would also suggest that any guy who is considering marriage today, go and watch this documentary called Marriage Incorporated.
Oh, yes.
And you can find that on YouTube. And if you can watch that whole thing and still come out of that and go, yeah, I think marriage is a great idea, well, then, you know better now. So, that it's all on you. So I'm not here talking with you right now trying to convince anybody to get into any kind of marriage, because you're right. And these guys are right. It's 100% all responsibility and 0% authority today. And I should also say that it's 0% appreciation right now, because all of the things that a man is expected to do traditionally today is based on the old social contract and the old social paradigm, what I call the old set of rules or the old rule books. And so the sacrifices that you would make in marriage is expected of you. And the fact that you would have to risk pretty much everything, financially, personally, emotionally, family-wise, everything else, the fact that you would have to do that, most women will just say, well, that's just part of the game. That's just part of it now. And you just have to deal with that. Well, that's great up until a point where you realize that there's no authority attached to it. No implicit authority, I should say, because there can be authority. If you look at marriages like myself, or you look at like somebody like Hunter Drew, these are the guys who are very much pro-marriage, but pro-marriage from a sort of a traditional conservative perspective. I'm not saying they're trad-coms, but I'm just saying that's the perspective. Then, I see how guys can say, well, if you get with the right girl, then there's an authority dynamic that works. Now, my counter to that is always, well, it makes no difference what you think your authority is. The police are going to tell you differently when they come to your door for a domestic dispute, because if it comes down to you or her, the police are told specifically to remove the man from the home, and it will always be like that. Now, people will always say, whenever I see shit like this, people will always say, whoa, gee, Rollo's going MGTOW now. I'm like, no, I'm not going MGTOW. I'm just presenting you the facts and presenting to you what you're up against or what you have to deal with. If you're going to get into a marriage, if you get into a long-term relationship with somebody that maybe you want to live with, or even if you don't live with them, but you have that long-term, maybe it's a commitment, maybe it's an implied commitment, maybe it's not a commitment at all, but you're still, attached to that person emotionally and maybe somewhat financially. When you get into those situations, again, if the police come to your door, you're the one they're dragging away and not her. So these are things that I think all guys need to be aware of before they get into any kind of relationship. Now, just by me saying that right now, that it's all, all a risk and all a downside, and it's all liabilities and it's all responsibilities and it's all accountabilities for men. Just because I'm saying that does not mean that I have a bad relationship. It does not mean that, that I'm going MGTOW, and all I'm doing is presenting facts to guys here. Now, if you are in a marriage, if you are in a long-term relationship, and if you want to sustain that, if you want to have kids, if you want to, in some way, you have decided that the only solution to your reproductive problems or your only solution to how you want to live your life includes a woman, I can give you the best practices to get into that situation and to maximize, what you can. But do not forget at any point that you are all risk and very little reward. Now, you have to find your reward intrinsically. Don't try to find your reward extrinsically, because what guys do is they try to get into a relationship and they say, well, I'm the man and I take care of this and I do that. And they get into what I call as relational equity. And they think that they're putting, they've decided that if they if they take care of their kids better, or if they do their homework with the kids, or if they're a little league coach, or they go and they do all of these great things and they're a great dad, that is in any way going to be some sort of insurance against hypergamy, you are very, very much mistaken. Okay, because if you drop the ball, if you backslide, if you go from an alpha frame in your relationship to ceding authority to your wife, or you put her into a position of authority, whereas perhaps before you're in your frame and you exit that and go into her frame, then you have to understand what you're setting yourself up for. None of that relational equity makes a damn bit of difference when she sees you as a beta, and maybe she saw you as an alpha before, maybe she never did in the first place. So before we get into this discussion today, let me say right now, I'm not pro-marriage and I'm not anti-marriage. I'm here just to say these are the facts, and if you want to get into a relationship, if you have decided that that's what you want, then I can certainly help you with that. I can certainly tell you what I think are the best practices to have, through your marriage or through your long-term relationship, and also to protect yourself in certain senses. Okay, to protect yourself in that kind of situation, you need to control the frame. And I've told the guys, I think that's probably the best place to start this whole conversation is,
yes,
you need to have frame. I've done probably 4 or 5 different podcasts, and I've written at least 3 or 4 different essays on the concept of frame and how important that is. In fact, if you go and you look at my first book and you look at the Iron Rules of Tomassi, of which there are 9, number 1 is control the frame. And the reason I put that is because that is the single most important aspect of any relationship you have, whether that's with your girlfriend or your wife or your mom or whoever you're working with. Their frame is always the context and like the environment of the relationship that you are in with anybody, really. But we always apply it towards interpersonal relationships.
I got a quick question here from RT Clincy. This is actually a very good question. He says, quote, "I wonder how hypergamy works. If, say, a woman gets a promotion, then starts making more than a man in a relationship, does hypergamy apply?" I know these guys don't want to hear my opinion, but
go ahead.
This is my theory. The more money, power, and influence a woman amasses over her lifetime, the further she shrinks her potential pool of suitors. The average female CEO has far less options that she is interested in than the secretary or the girl who works at McDonald's. What say you with regards to RT Clincy's question and my theory?
Okay. First off, I agree with your theory, but there's actually a couple more aspects of that you have to look at.
Okay.
Let's just say there's two ways to look at this from a guy's point of view. There's the guy who is dating a woman who already makes more than he does, okay? And then there's the guy who is in a relationship where maybe it was equal or maybe he was making more, and then the woman then she makes more. So you're looking at 2 different dynamics right there. So I'm going to go with the one where it's the guy and the woman who are already in an established relationship.
Okay.
The most important thing to remember about hypergamy is that it never seeks its own level. Okay, so it's never looking for a worse situation than it could possibly have. So when a woman is looking for a guy, she's looking for at least an equal balance, or she's looking for higher. There is no, like, for guys, doesn't matter. They're happy to have girl up here, but if it's 2 a.m, nobody's ugly, right?
Right.
So there is no attraction floor for men. Okay, for women, there's an attraction floor, and that's one of the reasons why I always say that men are not hypergamous. Only women are hypergamous, and people need to get that through their thick skulls. There ain't no hypogamy or any of that shit. Okay? There is only hypergamy, and it works with women. All men and women always want the best for themselves. Of course, they want to optimize their situations. If I have the little apple or I have the big apple, I want the big apple because it's going to sustain me more. And it's going to keep me going, right? Whether that's greed or that's sustenance is another discussion. But when it comes to hypergamy, when it comes to sexual selection, it comes to a woman's sexual strategy, it's important to remember that women have an attraction floor. Okay, so they don't want lower; they want at or above where they're at, and even at, they're still hoping that you're going to be above them at some point, or they're hoping that you have the potential to exceed them at some point. So now you're in a relationship with a woman And most likely you got into that long-term relationship because you were at or above her attraction floor. Okay. Now suddenly you are beneath her attraction floor. And why are you beneath her attraction floor? Is it because you got fat, and because you, from a physical standpoint, is it because you're now unarousing to her, or is it because she thinks less of you? Because now, most of the time, when a woman goes from a baseline salary to a higher salary, it means she's moving up in the, let's just say for sake of example, she's moving up in the corporate world. Who is she dealing with? If she's getting a raise in pay of some sorts, it's more likely that she is got some new responsibilities, new projects. She's in a new, employment situation. She's dealing with guys who are above her in status, most likely, or she's in a position where she's dealing with guys who are her superiors. They are her supervisors. They're men who are dictating terms to her. Okay. So if she's in, say, a supervisory role, or she's moved from just a management position to middle management, or maybe she's a director or whatever. I'm just sort of ad-libbing here.
I got you.
But now you have to understand what happens to her socially when this happens. So like I said, she's got a guy that's probably higher than her that's dictating terms to her, and she's trying to prove herself, in a corporate fashion. And most likely she has people that are beneath her. Okay, so she's probably got other men that are beneath her. She's probably got other women that are beneath her. And now she's trying to prove herself in a situation where now, before, she didn't have any real authority, and she's put into a position of authority. So that's all fine when she gets up at work. So what happens when she comes back home to the guy who's making less than her? How does she see that guy? Does she see that guy as her superior now? Well, if he's not making as much money as the guys who are dictating terms to her when she's at work, probably not. And this is one of the reasons I think that when this happens, it's a recipe for divorce. Like whenever a woman makes more money than a man in a relationship, those are unstable relationships. It's a loose or unstable attachment to that guy. Okay. And so just by her moving up, sometimes that means that he moves down. Now, there are ways that guys can counteract that if they see that happening. If you find yourself in that kind of relationship, you can up your game a little bit. You can up your game by getting yourself in shape, or putting yourself up into a better position. Maybe you need to, look into getting a better job or whatever. It just sort of becomes this arms race. And most guys don't want to do that. They don't want to say, well, I'm not going to do anything, to appease my wife. And in those situations, okay, fine, I can understand that. Maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe you want to scrub the whole relationship. But let's say you don't. If you are in that situation and you want to maintain your relationship, and you still have, you still think that there's some validity to doing that, there are other ways that you can up your game. So perhaps you want to, like I say, get yourself in better shape. Perhaps you want to move into some sort of position where you have a chance for, say, social proof, or you have a chance for pre-selection. One of the things that I have done in my past, because I work for liquor brands and such, I put myself into a situation where I generally have an opportunity to have some kind of status, to have some kind of, like I said, social proof or pre-selection. I'm always, if I'm going to a gig or something like that, I'm always picking out, the women that are going to be there to be my booth candy or whatever.
There you go.
So I put myself into a position where, I always say that, women don't want a man to cheat, but they love a man who could cheat.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So they don't want you to cheat, but they love a guy who could cheat, and they love a guy who what I call is the subject or the target of soft dread, or passive dread is what I call it. So you're not out there flirting with girls, but girls are flirting with you, and they're women pick up on different kinds of communications that guys are mostly oblivious to. But when those cues come in, and those behavioral cues come in, that creates what I call a passive sense of dread for a woman. I think there's two kinds of dread. There's passive dread and there's active dread. And most guys think when I talk about dread, it's always about, I'm going to go out and screw some other chick,
not text her for 5 straight days and just disappear.
No, in fact, I think that is probably the most ineffective form of dread. I think that soft dread is much more effective because it's organic.
Would you say that soft dread is an organic byproduct of a man's overall sexual market value?
Yes, definitely. Okay. And it's a byproduct of that, but it's also a byproduct of let's just say you're a guy who's in a relationship. I'm trying to relate this to relationships right now. So let's just say you're in a relationship and your SMVs are about equal.
Okay.
If she suddenly pushes herself up into a different status, into a different socioeconomic status, let's say, and you're left at that other level, there's ways to push yourself up. Okay. How you go about that, like I said, I think that the easiest way to do that is to get yourself into a situation where you can create some kind of passive dread in that situation. The other thing I think that you also have to consider is that when women put themselves up into that position and they're above you status-wise, you have to understand that that's relative and subjective to that woman as well. So if she's putting herself up there and she's having to be an authority over others and she's having to take direction from men who are above her, even though she has a higher status, they are basing, or they're conflating that value. They're conflating the value of their status at work with their sexual market value. So they're saying, well, hey, look, I've got a better job right now, so therefore I'm bumped up a half a notch or half a rating above you. Well, that's what they're thinking in the back of their head. Guys, on the other hand, aren't thinking that, because if she went to the gym and she lost 20 pounds and she could fit in a bikini better, or she started dressing herself up and she was very, very sexual,
or she gets a boob job.
Yeah, gets a boob job. That might bump her up in the eyes of a guy, but what she thinks should be valued by men, and in this case, that socioeconomic status, is not what it is. That men could really care less about that. I've said this before about professional women, in that professional women seem to think that the better they are at work and the more professional and the more they're dedicated to their careers, the more men should want them. And that is never the case.
It's interesting. I actually call that inverse projection. I've always said that one of the secrets to game, and pardon me for interrupting here,
that's cool,
but one of my secrets to game, as I tell guys on a first date, if you want to know what kind of man the woman you are with wants, ask her what kind of woman she is, and she will tell you. Because women strive to be the man that they want, or at least they do on the outside. So these professional women think that their sexual market values will be inflated the better they are at work, the more status and money they have, because they, of course, want a man who achieves the same things.
Yeah, well, so let's just say you're in that position right now. Let's say you're a guy and you're married to a woman who just got herself, bumped up a notch. I think it's also important for you to understand how that affects her ego. Okay. We always constantly talk about how social media overinflates women's egos, right? Well, another thing that overinflates them might be a bump in pay. It might be a new project that she's working on. It might be the fact that she has been nominated for, businesswoman of the year or some sort of, half-assed, award ceremony of some sort. So it's basically just pandering to her. But is your woman like that? Is she a careerist? And if she is a careerist, was she a careerist when you met her, or was it something that she developed herself into? I think that when guys are dating, they need to, this sort of goes back to what we're going to talk about here in a second, which is the guy who's dating a woman and not committed, but is dating a woman who makes more money than he does. I have done that in my sexual past. I have been the 22-year-old guy who actually,
how did it work out?
World announcement for you. When I was 22 years old, I had a 41-year-old girlfriend for
a
while. Yeah, she was the manager for a band that I was in at the time. And let's just say that she was attractive enough for me to be interested in having a sugar mama for a little while. Okay.
And breaking news, Rollo wanted a sugar
yeah,
mama,
yeah.
right?
So well, I don't, it's just how it worked out, really. I think she wanted a boy toy more than anything, but that lasted for probably about 6 or 7 months before that was, before I couldn't be faithful to that.
There you go.
So, but I think that there is definitely made more than I did, but the dynamic of that relationship had nothing to do with how much money I was making, because there's no expectation for that. There are women who are cougars who want to get together with a younger guy. You have to understand where most of them are in their phase of maturity and how they are basically what I call making up for missing out. And going back to, they could care less how much the guy makes as long as he's good in bed and he rocks her world. And she's looking for alpha fucks at that point, because she's had more than enough of beta bucks, and she doesn't have any use for a beta bucks guy at that point, because she's making enough money and that side of her life is completely secure. One of my wife's friends, she is a CT tech, and her parents were like pretty well off, like they were lawyers or something like that. So she was pretty much always taken care of from a financial point. And so consequently, what were the kind of guys that she was looking for? She was looking for the hot snowboarder dudes who, that she wanted to get with. And it didn't matter how much money they made. And it had no, there was no bearing on that relationship with, as far as, socioeconomic status was concerned, because that's not what she wanted out of a relationship. So I think that guys who get into that situation need to understand that they're probably in that situation. They're probably in that, she's making more and you don't have it. What you bring to that relationship has nothing to do with money. And I keep telling guys, when it comes to game, people say, well, money is all that matters. No. Some of the best sex I ever had was when I had 2 nickels to rub together. But I think that also kind of illustrates how men are attracted to women. Okay.
Sure.
I think that women mistakenly think that if they're more like a good catch for a guy is somebody who has, he's got a good career, he keeps himself in he's kind of good shape, he's got status, he's got social proof, he's got all this stuff. And women who are careerists think the same. They think that their success is based on the same things that would make a man attractive. But they don't, because men are different than women, and men want a woman who is A, hot, and B, sexually available.
There we go.
So that's really that's all that matters. If she happens to make a lot of money, that's great, man. That's like icing on the cake. But that is not the prime requisite of men when it comes to that kind of relationship. So that's what I got to say about, that imbalance there. I think that if guys get into that, I think the first thing they need to do is first thing you need to do is recognize that. They need to recognize that their woman has just bumped themselves up into a different, social status, and they need to find some way to, some kind of contingency for that, if that's what they decide that they want to do. I'm sure those guys probably right now in the chat room are saying, oh, you don't have to do anything for a woman. Well, if that's the way you feel, then get out of the relationship.
Gentlemen, you are listening to TSR Live, episode 215, with Red Pill legend Rollo Tomassi, author of The Rational Male, The Rational Male Positive Masculinity, and of course, the Rational Male Preventative Medicine, both volumes 1 and 2. You guys can follow him on Twitter at Rational Male. Of course, be sure to hit his website, it's the Rational Male.
Rational Male.
There we go. I've got it all linked in the description. And speaking of your wife, let's go back to your wife for a second without getting too personal here. A lot of guys, and it's so funny, like a lot of even red pill aware men, they say, Donovan, what should I look for in a woman to have a red pill relationship? I don't want to fuck sluts anymore. What should be the qualifications for a woman? So Mrs. Tomassi, right? What is it about her that has kept you with her for 21 years, despite knowing what you know about female nature?
First of all, I think that vetting women is something that I think that a lot of guys always think about, but once they get into that situation with a woman, all that shit flies
all goes
right
out the door,
the window.
Yeah.
So bear that in mind, because anytime, like right now, I can sit across from a guy and say, okay, let's go down this list, this checklist of all the things that you do. What are the deal breakers, right? I can put all those deal breakers on there, and guys will just like throw it out the window as long as she's hot and as long as she's sexually available. So keep that in mind while I tell you while I tell you all this. I didn't vet Mrs. Tomassi. Okay, I did not vet her from the perspective that we're about to talk about vetting. Okay. And I don't think most guys do this. I think most guys being beta. Okay. We're going to talk about the Pareto principle here. I believe that most men are blue pill betas. And I would say I'm going to be generous and say that's 80% of men right now.
Okay.
It might be a little more, it might be a little less. People can argue with me all I want, but let's just say, for sake of argument, 80% of men are beta, and they're just happy as shit to have a girl who wants to have sex with them, who looks kind of good, and who will see past all these things that might be red flags, or they might not even be red flags. They might just be annoyances, or it might be just something about her that they don't like, but they're willing to see past that because they're in that, beginning stage of a relationship, and they're having sex every other day, and it's a lot of fun, and they really like this person, and there's something special about her. Or I think she's the one, or it's just there's just something about her, and it's like, no, whenever I hear shit like that, it just goes up my fucking neck. So, but that is part of the infatuation side. So I think that men need to understand that that's going to be part of that process when they get to a point where, I want to live with her. I want to, I want to have something a little bit more than just having her as a plate. When I met Mrs. Tomassi, my first impression with her, and I remember I'm 26 years old, 27 years old, and I'm out of this really horrible relationship with that BPD I was just talking about a little while ago. And I'm looking at her, and we're dating non-exclusively. And that was the way I wanted it, and that was the way she wanted it, even though I thought I had kind of screwed things up, because when we first dated, it's like I didn't hear from her for like 2 or 3 days, and I'm like, oh gosh, I guess I fucked that up, right? Well, then 3 days later, she calls me up and she says, hey, do you want to go do such and such? I mean, she's hitting me up for dates. And I'm like, okay, because prior to that, I was used to either just hitting it and quitting it, or I was a branch swinger. I was like this serial monogamist who would go from one girlfriend to the next girlfriend. And so it was really weird to me to be dating as an adult. So here we are, non-exclusively dating. I know she's seeing other guys, and she knows I'm seeing other girls at the same time. We just happen to be part of each other's roster, I guess, at that time. And then eventually she tells me, hey, I don't like the idea of you having sex with other women. I want us to be exclusive. And so she asked me to be exclusive, not the other way around.
Okay.
So, and that was one of the first times I'd ever had that happen. So I'm like, yeah, all right. Because she was the hottest woman I was seeing at the time. And, again, vetting, I'm going to think of who's the hottest, who's going to be most sexually available, who's the most fun. And she seemed the most fun, and she had a lot of other qualities to her that made her fun. Okay. And so there was never any of this really deep, where are we at in this relationship? And what are we, it's like this constant, insight and this constant navel gazing about the relationship. There's never any of that. And I think that was probably one of the biggest benefits to our very early relationship, is that we weren't constantly trying to evaluate relationships and where was it going or anything like that.
Right. What are we? Who are we? Let's get the title, etc.
We just did it. Okay. And I know that sounds very, very zen, but one of the things I tell guys is I say, if you have a good relationship, it's effortless. Okay. You're not like, what you always hear, relationships are a lot of hard work. No. Good relationship is effortless. You don't have to do anything. You know what the other person is about, and you know what you can expect from them, and they know what to expect from you. All this bullshit about open communication, and it's like, no, it's not open communication. It's what you're saying. It's you doing your relationship. It's not you thinking about your relationship. It's you doing your relationship. And so in the beginning, I just got it. I mean, I was at a point in my life where I understood enough about women. I had been with enough women at that point where I just, I've got this really famous essay, and it's in the book. It's called Just Get It. And I just got it. So here I am in an effortless relationship, and I'm thinking, I really like this person. I might be in love with this person. But my deepest question at that time was, can I be faithful to her? And that was me vetting me. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because I've been in relationships before, and I've been unfaithful in those relationships. I've been cheated on, and I've been the cheater before. And I was thinking about that, and I go, is this somebody that I can be faithful to? Because I know me, I've seen me do it. So, and then the answer to that was yes. And so, you know, I was out of position, and I was in no hurry to get married. I did not want to get married, but just it got better and better, and it seemed like it was inevitable. It wasn't like, I was getting, you know, so here we are, you know, exclusive with each other, and it seemed to me like it was something that was just going to happen anyways, you know, sooner or later. I wasn't planning ahead. I wasn't thinking about, we're going to have 2.5 kids, or I wasn't thinking of any of that shit. I was just thinking, I'm just going to let this go and see where it goes. And I think the one thing that pushed me over the edge was, we were at her sister's house, and her sister had 2 kids, and one of her, my nephew and my niece, and my niece was, I think, probably about 6 or 7 years old back then. And I saw how she interacted with her niece, and how her niece interacted with her, and was just so loving. It was so natural. And was just like, that was the first time I ever looked at a woman and said, she would make a good mother. And wow. So I thought about that. And that was really what sort of pushed me over the edge to propose to my wife at that point. And so, first off, could I be faithful to her? Second of all, would she make a good mother? And I was just talking to my daughter about this not too long ago. And I said, you know, at 50 years old, because my daughter's dating, and she's going into, you know, she's got a boyfriend right now.
Oh my God.
She's gonna be 20 this year. I'm gonna be 50 this year. So it's like, I'm talking to her about stuff and how different, because she's asking me questions about boys and her boyfriend and everything. And I'd say, well, you know, when I was 25 years old, and you have that 25-year-old mindset, you look at a woman, and you look at a woman in the club or wherever, and you go, damn, she's hot. I want to get with that. I want to hit that. You're not thinking, she'd be a really good mother. You don't think those things. You don't think in the long term. You just think about how you're going to get into that tonight. You're not thinking about what you're going to do in the future. You're not thinking about how's this person going to affect my life if I get into that situation. And I think that too many guys, because they have this blue pill mindset, and they have this very romanticized idea of what, you know, a relationship with a man and a woman, you know, should be. I think that especially younger guys, they have they're of two mindsets. The most beta guys that are younger want to get into a relationship as fast as they can, and they want to get out of the game because they're so uncomfortable with having to play it and have to approach and the rejection that comes with it. And you know, I talk to guys, I counsel guys who are like 24, 25 years old now. Mm-hmm. And these guys have just got out of these horrible relationships. And I go, okay, good. Stop. Don't do anything. Spin plates, read my book. I'll counsel you. I'll help you out with this stuff. And maybe for 3 months, they're like, yeah, this is great, man. I'm getting laid like I never did before. And this is the most fantastic thing in the world. Now, if I could just find my dream girl. I'm like,
have you not learned anything?
No, don't do that. You know, and it's like, you don't even think about monogamy until you get to be 30 years old. You want another thing? Wait till you're past 30 before you consider any kind of monogamy, certainly any kind of marriage, because guys right now don't understand. If you're listening to this, you're watching this, and you're 22 some odd years old, it's going to be a whole different world for you when you're 32 or when you're 35 or when you're where I say you're going to be at your sexual market value peak, because all the stuff that makes you very, very valuable today, that's good, and keep going with that. But it takes time to get to your peak sexual market value. It takes time for you to mature up here and in the wallet. And it takes so much more for men to become men. And we always say that, you know, women just are, and
that's
men
right.
must become.
That's right. Women are born. Men are made, right? Women are born.
And women are born. And so once you get to, I know so many dudes who have always said, I wish I had your book when I was 26 or 27 years old, because then I wouldn't have been in this divorce, or then I wouldn't have got myself into the situation that I did. And even if they had my book back then, I would still tell them, wait until you're hitting your stride. Wait until, because you will have so much more selection capacity. It will be about your strategy. We always talk about how scientifically or biologically, or even in Evo Psych, we talk about men display and women choose. Well, I believe that to a point, but I think that once a woman's sexual market value declines, that shifts. So when a woman is on her decline and she's right around what I would say the epiphany phase.
The epiphany, yes, right.
When she's between 28 and 31 years old, that's that epiphany phase where she's on her decline and you're on your way up. And too many guys sell out. They completely, they put all their money on red and they sell out right at 27, 28 because they think that that's their only chance, or they think that their ship has come in and this girl who never would have had anything to do with them back when they were 22, suddenly she likes him. Suddenly she's looking for a guy just like him. That guy who has always been faithful and loyal and this perfect provider and this, he looks like he's good husband material after she's done with her party years. And I'll go ahead and say it, the cock carousel, and she's done with all that. And she's decided that now she can't play the game as effectively as she used to play it. At that time, exactly at that time, you're heading this way and she's heading this way. And so I always tell guys, at least wait until you're 32, 33 years old so you can experience that phenomenon, because you will have so much more selection capability at 33 than you did at 23.
That's right.
So, and also you'll be a better judge of character. You'll be a better judge of, once you have learned how women's nature works and how the game is played on you, not with you, on you.
Yes.
And then by the time you get up to, say, let's just say you're 34 or 35 and you're starting to hit your stride, at least you can make an informed decision. So now, if, like we were just talking about before, maybe it takes you that long to sort of, unlearn all the shit that you had to learn from the blue pill that it taught you from a very, very early age to where you are. Now you've unlearned all that. Now you can at least make an informed decision with a woman and figure out which woman would make the best choice for a good mother, for a good long-term choice, somebody who's going to take care of themselves. I am thankful every day that I made the decisions to look at my wife from a physical standpoint right then and there, because that was very, very important to me then, and it is now too. And my wife has stayed in fantastic shape, looks freaking great, still fun in bed and out of bed, and also was a great mother. Now you could say, well, Rollo just lucked out. He just found the right girl. She was a quality woman. And I will tell you right now that even the most quality woman in the world, when you marry her, can turn into the worst decision you've ever made in your life.
Exactly. So, that's where the maintenance goes. And that's the purpose of this podcast. It's how to keep her a quality woman when you find her.
Well, and then again, that goes back to, is she somebody that's going to follow your lead? And if you want to talk about, here's the other part of vetting. You need to find out if that woman looks up to you. Does she admire you? Are you somebody who is definitely 1 to 2 points above her in SMV? Even if that's not true, like logistically or realistically, I should say, even if that's not true, does she see you perceptually as somebody who is 1 to 2 steps high above you, or even 3? And then that's when things get ugly. But does she see you as somebody that she can admire? I have this one post. I really should put it in a book someday, but it's called Admiration and Respect. And we always talk about respect. You don't respect women. I've written lots of stuff about respect, but I've only ever written that one post about admiration. So it's one thing to have a woman who respects you. There's a lot of women, a lot of wives who respect their husbands, and they do it just out of hand. They have to, because he's the man and he's the one who brings them money, and they have to respect him. But they don't admire that guy. They don't look up to him as somebody who they would have to compete with other girls to keep his interest. Like I said, women want a guy who could cheat. Is he a guy that could cheat on her? So there's that aspect of it. There's the other aspect of, is it your frame that she is walking into, or are you walking into her frame? Do you have a reality that you have built up? Do you have a lifestyle? Do you have a personality? Do you have status and affluence? And do you have all of these great qualities? And have you created your own world that she wants to be associated with and she wants to come in? or are you, or has she done that and she makes the world, makes the world and makes the rules, and you're coming into that? Because I'll tell you right now, I've said this in damn near every time I've been asked this question, is that when you go into a relationship, that relationship's frame will be predicated on what your relationship was before you got married. So like I'm sure you hear this all the time. Guys hit me up and they say, Rollo, I lost the frame. How do I get it back? I was alpha, but when I was single, but now I've backslidden and now I turned into this beta because it's just, this step by step, going beta and going blue pill and wanting to, instead of being the bulwark and being the strong, guy that she wants, even if it means that she's pounding on your pounding on your chest, even if that's the case, are you doing that? Are you being the strong, dominant, masculine guy in your relationship? Or has your relationship been defined by these incremental compromises up to where you are? So little by little, it doesn't happen all at once. You don't just go, oh, I'm beta today.
Right, no, exactly. The fall from
little by little by little.
The fall from alpha to beta is never precipitous. It's almost like, as the relationship goes on, the woman just takes piece by piece by piece. And it's never a big deal at the time, but at some point, a confluence of events, you look up, you wake up in the morning and she's fucking her coworkers.
Yep. Yeah. Divorce is a series of compromises.
That's right.
Okay. It's a series of compromises for a man. And then, so there's that side of it. And then finally, I think probably the next biggest thing, and I talked about this to Richard Cooper before, because he asked me exactly the same question. I think that the one thing that if you really want to test your life, if you want to shit test your wife and you want to shit test the woman that you want maybe to possibly be your wife, ask yourself this simple question. Does she trust you with her life? If you were to go up into a plane and you were going to go skydiving and you say, hey, baby, come on, we're going to go skydiving. And she's never done it before. And you'd say, don't worry about it. I packed your chute. You're going to be okay. Is she going to go up there with you? Or is she going to say, is she going to back out and say, no effing way am I going to do this? And then even if she does, is she going to want somebody else to go pack your chute for you and make sure that, is she trusting you basically with your life?
Wow.
And I use this as an example because I've been driving cars with women for a very long time. And it's interesting to me that I always think about what a woman's reaction is if she's sitting in the passenger seat and I'm the one that's driving, because essentially I have your life in my hands.
That's right.
I told Rich that too, because we were at the 21 convention and I had rented this red Camaro and we were driving around streets of Orlando and I'm looking at, your life is in my hands right now. and I mean, and how does the woman react to that? Is she hanging on to the oh shit bar going, oh, right. Please, or is she is she like a jumpy little nervous bird when she's in the car with you, or is she just relaxed and she's talking to you and she trusts you, like implicitly trusts you with your life? Because if a woman cannot trust you with her life, how can she trust you with a kid? How can she trust you with anything else? I would, if I were a guy, and I'm telling guys, if you're bound and determined to get married, find out if she trusts you with her life. If she doesn't, don't marry her, because essentially that's what marriage is it's you're betting your life on that person. You're betting, because especially if you have a kid, you are bound to that person for the rest of your life.
That's right.
You are, even especially for guys, we talk about all the downside of marriage. Yeah, well, guess what? You will be bound to that woman even if you're divorced. You'll be bound to her for the rest of your life. So, question: does she trust you with her life? And I think that's something that guys really need to take into account.
Okay. Shout out to Matty Gossi, a couple of super chats, one for $5, one for $10. Also, shout out to Spartacus Jackson with the $10 super chat. He asks, what's Rollo's opinion on the role of manhood and womanhood in a healthy marriage? Keep up the good work.
That's funny. I just got into that topic with Craig James and Hunter Drew not too long ago.
Okay.
I definitely think that if you read my third book, which is Positive Masculinity, I go into parenting and I go into a little bit about this, into gender roles and what I call conventional masculinity. And I don't like to use the term traditional masculinity because that implies an acculturated tradition. So, me as a white guy, I'm going to have a different traditional masculinity than you as a black guy is going to have traditional masculinity. So that's why I don't use that. But I think that there are characteristics and there are commonalities between all men when it comes to masculinity and masculine qualities and attributes and such. And so I call that conventional masculinity, which I think has been under fire at least since the sexual revolution.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely. I think that the being unapologetically masculine in a conventionally masculine way it's dangerous right now. But to do that separates the men from the boys, literally.
Yeah, right.
And I'm constantly seeing what was it? I think on Twitter not too long ago, I saw this story in Harper's Bazaar about how we need to teach our boys to be more girly, or how Queer Eye for the Straight Guy or something like that.
Remember that joke of a show?
Yeah. Well, now there's a comeback of it right now, and they're saying, oh, it's going to be the salvation for toxic masculinity. Right?
Oh, what?
So essentially what you're saying is that homosexual men are going to teach heterosexual men how to be better heterosexual men. I'm like, this does not follow, but that's just what we're up against right now. And so I think he's right. What role does that play? I think that the most important role that a conventionally masculine guy plays as a father and as a husband in a marriage is that it sets that model, or that gender model. People say role models. I like to think of things in gender models. You are modeling a masculinity that is going to be the archetype for whatever your kids' ideas when they get older is going to be about what makes a man, what makes a woman. Right. So if you got a woman who's a single mother and she's a feminist and she's taking her kids out to the Women's March and she's making them carry signs and everything and all this, so you got that woman that is the definition and the model of femininity for her kids. Okay. So you take another woman who's a good mother and she's sexy, she puts her husband first, and she, is committed to, and committed to her marriage and committed to her husband and committed to, being a good mother and teaching, her daughter and her son what a positive conventional femininity looks like. That's going to be the model for that too. So I think that the most important part that those play is in the raising of kids right now. So I think that's something to think of. And then also you need to have that as I'm just going to go by masculine dominance right now. I think strong, positive masculine dominance in a relationship, and women hate that. They hate that word dominance because it sounds like dominance. It's not dominance. It's deference to the man as the authority. And like I said, right now, for most marriages, it's all responsibility and zero authority for a man, because we always want to talk about some sort of egalitarian relationship between men and women. And I think that's where a lot of conflict comes in, because if you're going to presume some sort of equality between men and women in a marriage, the woman is always going to be the one who has the most power because she has the pussy. Okay. And so she's going to be the one who's going to hold out and do whatever she wants to and make the rules, because she has something that the man always wants. And if you're in a marriage, that's the only way to get it. Okay. Okay. Assuming you're not going to cheat on her or whatever. If you're locked into that and you're honoring your vows and everything else. Yes. So in any egalitarian situation, there's no way that you're going to get your wife's genuine desire if you are practicing some sort of egalitarian equalist type of thing. Okay. There's always going to be that power. This is a power dynamic in every relationship, whether that's you working with somebody or your family and your mom and your dad, or your, a husband and a wife. There's always a power dynamic in there. There's always a dominant and there's always a submissive. Even in homosexual relationships, that is true. There's always a dominant partner and there's always a submissive. There's a top and a bottom. And in a heterosexual marriage between a man and a woman, that dominant top always needs to be the man, because if she cannot admire you and she cannot respect you, then why is she with you? Because most women's egos are defined by the man that they marry, because there's an association there. I've seen guys who are the most beta, doormat guys you've ever known, and their wives will beat them or browbeat them and tell them, basically treat them like another kid in the house. and they'll go ahead and do that. But then as soon as like some other guy says, you're pussy whipped, or as soon as they say, as soon as they say something, that woman steps up, she goes, he's a man and he's a more man than you. And he, will completely run to his defense, even right after having berated him for something that the other guy was going to berate him too. Why is that? The reason for that is because that man is an association. It's a reflection on her as a woman. So if she's got this really super weak guy, she wants to maintain the power, the authority and the power in the relationship. She's going to come to that guy's defense because that guy's a reflection of her. And so it really needs to be the other way around. There needs to be a dominant male and a dominant masculine force within that relationship who's going to, who is confident and decisive and makes a decision for everybody. And she can look up to him and she can admire him. Now, we were just talking about that as far as vetting is concerned. That's one of the reasons it's very important that your woman admire you. And the only way she's going to admire you is if you have a strong, dominant, conventionally masculine, red pill attitude about you.
Shout out to Miami J with the $10 super chat. He says, Rollo, any quick advice for raising a daughter? So you've talked about your daughter. Any quick advice about, because again, this is another troublesome topic in the red pill community. We talk all this stuff about female nature and bitches ain't shit and this and that and the other and AWOlt and all that, or AWOlt and all that. So what if a man has a daughter? Any quick advice for raising a daughter?
Well, guess what? I have a daughter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Who is the dating age?
I only have a daughter. I do not have a son. Although I do have a nephew who is 19 as well. So
there we go.
So I feel like somewhat responsible for that. But anyways, yes, raising a daughter was such an important question that I was getting from pretty much a lot of the guys who are hitting me up about, like guys like Hunter or the guys who are into, married man red pill or married red pill. And I think that I should say that in Positive Masculinity, I have a chapter in there that is dedicated just to raising daughters. And it's part of the original work too. So you're not going to find that in my essays, or you're not going to find that on the blog. So that's the only place you'll find that one part. But I think that if you just want a quick tip, I think that the most important thing that guys need to consider when they're raising a daughter is to not raise them like they're your son. And I think that a lot of guys, particularly, once again, it goes back to 80% beta guys, they always want to feel like they're going to make a difference in the world and they're going to make a difference with their daughter. You can see this in like a lot of these very pro-feminine commercials. Right now, the one that comes to mind is, I don't know if you saw it, but it was a Super Bowl commercial, not this Super Bowl, but the last Super Bowl. And it was when everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency. And it was an Audi commercial. And it was about this guy who was talking about how he didn't want to repress his daughter's, pioneering spirit and to crush her soul and to make sure that she has every opportunity to do, and she's, of course, this little girl is in this little, race, or the Pinewood Racer or something like that. And it's like, no, who does this shit anymore, really? But so it's this very inspiring thing. But the whole thing was basically how this guy was going to give his daughter the world. But in the same sense, I think that a lot of that comes from a beta male guilt. Okay. So when you get these beta guys who are in a position where they're fathers of daughters, there's this expectation of having to put themselves as, the supportive father in that situation, but it's supportive in such a way that it makes her a good feminist in the future. It makes her a good candidate for going to college and doing all the things that women could never have done before. Right. I'm not saying don't give your daughter the world. Do that. But I think a lot of guys, they feel that beta male guilt, and then they feel like, well, my daughter is really into girly things. She's into ballet, and she's into, whatever it is, she's into bedazzling her things, or, whatever. She's very girly. Don't go and take that girl and then say, I think you should learn how to play football, or I think you should learn how to do, something that's traditionally, conventionally masculine, especially if that girl has a predisposition towards doing something girly. I see a lot of guys do that because they want to prove to their wives to their friends, to the world, really, because that's supposed to be that's the narrative these days, that you gotta push your daughter into male space, right? You got to make sure you have to prove to the world that girls can do anything boys can do. And I think that avoiding that, and not, raise a girl like a girl, raise a boy like a boy. If a girl says, hey, I really want to learn to, go fishing and go camping and go like do all these things the Boy Scouts would do, if she says that she has an interest in that, yeah, by all means, go ahead, but don't steer her over there because you think that a girl in male space is in some way liberating, or is in some way some kind of novelty. Because I'll tell you right now, it's not a novelty. We've been doing this shit for a long time, where we're trying to, what we just say, the Boy Scouts just accepted girls.
Oh, I heard about that.
Right?
What? Oh my God.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The reason that shit exists is because enough fathers said, I wish my girl could be in the Boy Scouts too, because girls can do anything boys can do, but they're not trying to push their boys into the Girl Scouts.
Right.
It's not that, it has nothing to do with that. All it has to do is with what I say is beta male guilt. And that beta male guilt is manifested in a lot of ways, but particularly when as a father, you try to steer them over into the boy side of things. Let's just say for a second that maybe you're a red pill guy and you're a red pill father and you have a daughter. I would also say that you need to curb this outside influence, what I like to call the village. Okay. They always say, it takes a village to raise a child, or Hillary Clinton was saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that village is a whole lot different than when they actually made that, that saying up. Okay. Today, that village consists of, 97% of teachers being female. It's the Disney messages that you see of, what I call the fempowerment narrative.
There you go.
You have all of this outside extrinsic influence on girls right now. I think that red pill men need to be sort of a bulwark against that. They need to be the guy that maybe you keep them off of social media. Maybe maybe you do a few things that sort of curb that influence in their lives. You're not ever going to be able to curb it entirely. And then finally, I think the most important thing that a red pill guy can be for a daughter, I think, is to be as masculine and be the best dominant male, red pill aware guy that you can be. I think that living out that role, internalizing the red pill, internalizing your understanding of your relationship with your wife, how she relates to you, how you relate to her, being that model. I think that is the single most important aspect of being a father to a daughter. A lot of people, because my daughter's fantastic, man. She's in college right now. She's always been a straight A student. She is a model. She has been, I won't say what, but she's been a pageant winner. I mean, she's that good looking, and she is that, accomplished in her life right now, and is definitely going places. I mean, she's just a fantastic kid. And then the guys that, and I noticed this because, imagine you're Rollo Tomassi's daughter. Okay.
Oh my God, of course. Right.
Now imagine you're dating Rollo Tomassi's daughter. So the guys that she has been with, and she's only had maybe two boyfriends, like two serious boyfriends. And the one that both of them really, but the one that she's with right now is very much like me. Both personality wise and just like hobbies and interests wise, and is, just a really, if you want to, I would say the guy is almost maybe a little bit more alpha than I am. The guy is definitely a natural alpha, and is, I would say, a really good match for my daughter. I've been really struggling with this because like one of her friends who is like 20 years old is marrying another one of their friends, and he just proposed to her. And I mean, these kids are very, very young. And I'm really kind of torn between them, because just what we were talking about, how they don't know what they're getting into, and they don't know what, like the guy does not know what he's missing out on or anything like that. But then there's the tradcon side of things where it's like, well, at least she is, has only ever been with this guy. At least they have the chance of being a solid married couple. I mean, there's that aspect of it, and then there's the complete disaster side of that. So I'm kind of in between that. I wouldn't want my daughter to get married right now, but it's like when, I think, and this is a real good question that I don't necessarily know that I have the answer to right now, which is when as a red pill father, do you say would be a good time for your daughter to get married? You know, do you wait until the epiphany phase, or do you say, well, you're the 23, you're at your sexual peak, you're at your fertility peak,
right?
I mean, because I mean, logistically and pragmatically, you know, I mean, so many guys will get all over my case about saying, well, why are you telling men to, you know, go out and spin plates and yada yada? And I'm like, well, you know, from a guy's standpoint, that makes sense, but from a girl's standpoint, it seems to me that it would be better for girls to get married earlier, where it's better, I think, for guys to get married later. I think it was Aristotle. I've quoted this where Aristotle actually said that the best time for a woman to get married is 18, and the best time for a man to get married is 36. And he said this back in, you know, in Athens and Greece, God knows how long ago. And I think that that's probably true. I think that, you know, if women are hitting their sexual peak and the fertility peak much earlier, and men aren't made into men until much later. So, I mean, and like I said, I don't have an answer for that just yet. And maybe that's something I need to consider.
I think it's a developmental thing. I think Illimitable Man said something to this effect. We did a podcast, I think, right around a year ago. And he said that experience and struggle and strife is attractive on a man. Struggle and strife is very unattractive on women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, that's definitely true. I also think that women do not, I think women naturally look for competency in men. I think that is something that is sort of written into their DNA, because when you look back on our, you know, our hunter-gatherer beginnings, you'll go back 100,000 years ago. I mean, we are still, you know, plumbing and mechanically the same critters that we were way back when. We're just now here in the in 2018. And so we're still trying to deal with, you know, all of this technological and all of the sociological advancement that's taken place really in just the last 100 years. And we're trying to catch up to that. But I think that still, even with all that going on, it is I think it's a part of hypergamy, really, and part of women's sexual selection strategy to look for competency in a man, because they want somebody who they can, in the long term, they can be protected by and secured by, and to know that their kids are going to be secure as well. And even when, like, guys tell me, you know, we have this discussion all the time. It's like, you know, since women's security and beta buck side of hypergamy is made up for by, you know, resource transfer from men or the state or whatever,
right,
that women are only looking for the alpha fuck side of things. And I completely agree with that. I've written posts about that, but I don't think that eliminates the hindbrain need for that security. Like, when I talk to guys, they say, well, I'm with this girl and she, just what we're talking about, she's making a whole lot of money and she really doesn't need me for security. And I go, well, that's only true from the financial side of things. Women still want a guy who's competent, and they still want a guy who knows how to handle his business, who knows that if an emergency occurs, that she can rely on that guy to, you know, get her out of the emergency. Again, to trust her or trust you with your life.
What is it? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that security need is not entirely met. It might be met in terms of finances and provisioning, but it's not necessarily met by competency. So,
which is equally important. A lot of people are asking, what is the best age for women to marry?
Yeah, well, good question. That's just what I've been asking. If I had to put a number on it, I'm going to say, if I go strictly by EvoPsych and EvoBio, I would definitely say today's age, I would say 22 to 24, somewhere in between there. And that, of course, is women's sexual market peak, right? Because what is it that makes a woman attractive at that particular time? You know, when we go and you look at, what was it? I think it was in Dataclysm, the stats that OkCupid was putting out about, like, men and women in their dating and stuff like that. Yeah. And I got this from Carl from Black Label Logic, and it was a graph, I guess, that they did, and they just took the statistics from, you know, people's dating profiles as to what age are women the most attractive and what age are men most attractive, and they did that by age of the opposite sex. So, for instance, for women, it was if the woman was say 30 years old, she was interested in a guy who was 35 to 37 years old, right? It's usually about a 5 to 7 year difference. So if a woman's 25, it's like 30 to 32 maybe.
Okay.
So it staggers it up as women get older, right? Of course, they think that that's how men should be too, that they should find them attractive, and it doesn't work that way, because the other stat was they asked men the same question at every age, from like say 18 on up to 70 years old for men. The only ages that they found attractive were 22, 23, and 24. Those were the only ones for every single age bracket for guys. So from a biological standpoint and from a fertility standpoint, and then, from hopefully getting to a woman who's maybe, I think it's probably too much to ask for to have a virgin bride, but I think that if you get in early, you can certainly be a significant alpha influence on a woman at that age, because you're only talking about maybe she's been sexually active since what, 17, 16?
Yeah, probably even younger.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe I'm being naive about that, but I mean, when I first got laid, it was 17 years old. So, so let's just say that, for instance, I would say that between 22, 23, and 24, from a biological standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, we can debate about that, but I think just from an evo psych, evo bio, that's what
okay. Well, as we round third and head for home here, I guess the $1 million question, like we've talked all about the fact that marriage is just a bad bet for men, and men who discover the red pill, they are rightfully avoiding marriage. It's not going to get any better in our lifetime. So what do you advise the men to do who are already in marriages? So they've been married for 7 years, they've got a couple of kids. Wife is, she's fat, she's bitchy, she might have cheated, et cetera, et cetera. How can, and again, I know you sort of quasi answered this question earlier. Hey, how do I get back the frame? But what would you advise men to do if they're in a marriage, who have just discovered the red pill or have red pill awareness? What would you advise them to do with that?
Okay. What you're describing, and I want to say it was Ryan or somebody on the Married Red Pill Reddit forum was saying, this is what they call awakened while married. Maybe it might be MGTOWs we're saying something. You've been awakened while married. And what that means is like you were beta and following this blue pill script all your life. And then maybe you've been married for 10 years and suddenly you pick up the rational male and you go, oh shit, this is where I'm at. That's what we call awakened while married. And I have the guys that I do personal counseling with, I would say these are the most common guys that hit me up and say, will you please help me? And to the point where I had to write a series of posts that ended up in the third book in Positive Masculinity, and it's called The Reconstruction. Okay. And what I do in that series of posts is I kind of step by step define the problems where you're at, and then I'm not big on prescriptions, but I try to give as good a prescription for guys as I possibly can in that. I think there's two steps to that. The first one is realizing and understanding where you're at and what, how is your relationship defined from a blue pill or a frame-wise definition. Does your wife have the frame? Okay. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, but maybe she's not having sex with you. She is just completely indifferent and doesn't, really care about you. What is your relationship really about? Are you married to this really super bitchy woman who makes more money than you, who is basically raising the children and you're another child that she's raising? So defining your own situation and then being brutally honest with yourself about that. I think that a lot of married guys who become awakened while married have the highest tendency to go and stick their heads in the sand and to want to either go purple pill or they want to just completely go into denial and say, oh, these red pill guys are full of shit. Okay. So it's important to be honest with yourself, and it's important to, look, most of the guys who are going to come to me or who are going to even ask this question, I think it's safe to say that they've already swallowed the red pill and they want to get into a better situation. Then comes the next tough question. Once you're honest with yourself, the next question is, do you want to stay in a relationship with this person?
There you go.
And most often guys will say yes. They really, really want to they want to make things better. They have invested themselves, like I said, with in relational equity. They want to feel like their sacrifices and their investments and their efforts haven't gone to waste. Because let's say they've been in a marriage for 10 or 12 years, their kids are maybe 8, maybe 10. What's it going to be like when they've been in for 20 years? And they're looking down the road and going, is this something I really want to, commit myself to? I have another post called The Paradox of Commitment. And a lot of guys go through a soul searching process when they come to this. Are they committed to their marriage, or are they committed to themselves?
Right.
And what's best for themselves, or what's best for the marriage? And are they is the sacrifice, worth it? And we talked about this on the other podcast about, Jordan Peterson is all about sacrifice.
Right.
The most noble thing a man can do is sacrifice himself.
Listen, men sacrifice themselves all the time for women, and how's that working out for us in this climate,
exactly.
right?
Well, in the first book, I've got a chapter in there called Appreciation. It's like, is your wife really going to appreciate any of the sacrifices that you make? And I would say unanimously, in every single instance, when it comes to investing yourself in that relationship or the family or whatever, again, your sacrifices don't mean shit. Hypergamy doesn't care. Does not care. So I think that coming to terms with that and then saying, okay, is this something that I want to still involve myself in? And most guys are really emotionally attached to their wives. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be looking for a solution to make things better for them. Most guys want to find a way to coexist with their wife in such a way that it's better for them, and they want to come home from work, to see their wives. They want to have something to look forward to. They really enjoy who their wife is and what their marriage is really about. And most guys don't do that, but they have most guys have really shitty marriages. I'm sorry to say, but that's just a statistical truth. That's just how it is, man. It's just a statistical truth. And if you don't believe me, go look at the Married Red Pill, go look at the Dead Bedrooms subreddit on Reddit. I can point you in a million different directions as to why most guys are in shitty marriages. And they're always looking for a way out. They're always looking for something better. That's why they go to marriage counseling. That's why they think that that's going to work for them. They think that they can negotiate their way out of a bad relationship and into a good relationship. They think that, and again, that's another thing I disagree with about Jordan Peterson, is that he talks about how, negotiating with your wife is the way to a happy, healthy marriage. And I will say, no, absolutely not, because not all you are. And I'm saying that from a point of pride. I'm saying that from a practical standpoint, because all negotiation leads to is obligated compliance. So when you are negotiating for your wife's desire, she might sit there and, give you starfish sex because you guys had a terms of agreement, right? But that's not a genuine, natural, organic desire. And most guys want that out of their wives. And some of them had it before they got married. And then, again, progressively they went beta, or something went the wrong way, and they abdicated their authority and they're in the situation that they're in. So I would say that most guys really still want to stay married to their wives. I mean, to their credit, they still want to do that. But you have to really take an honest to God assessment of, who your wife is and who you are, and who she's always been and who you've always been. Okay. A lot of people say, well, you change when you're in marriage. Yes, that's true. But there's still certain aspects. I guarantee if you go and talk to 90% of the guys who are in bad relationships, they know, it's been bad for a long time. And they've been just hoping it was going to get better. And they were just hoping that if there's just some magic way that, if I just learn the red pill, I'll find some way out of this. And it's like, no. You need some, sometimes bad shit happens to people and it's not your fault. It's somebody else's fault.
There you go.
And I know that people don't like that because they think that, well, that's blaming your problems on somebody else. I honestly think you need to look at yourself, be insightful as well. But you know what? Sometimes people are just dicks. Okay. You really have to, understand that, people are different. Maybe you grew that way, maybe you weren't that way, but people are different at this point. And you need to make that assessment and then ask yourself, is this somebody who is really worth the investment? Has this always been a bad investment? Or is this something that could possibly be turned around? Once you've answered that, and I'd say most of the guys will say yes, just because they're emotionally invested in the relationship. But once you've answered that, then what you have to do is you have to completely dissociate yourself from your wife. And what I tell these guys is don't do this in the literal sense, but in the mental and psychological sense. Men need to divorce their wives. They need to break up from their girlfriends. They need to break up from their wives. Even if you're still living together in the same house, you need to have the mentality that you're broken up with that person. Because if you make this big 180 turn in your personality, it's not going to seem authentic. So if you go and you say, you know what, I'm red pill now, honey, and I'm going to get to the gym and I'm going to go do this. You're going to go tell her all this stuff, thinking that that's going to make her come around and see you as a different person. You're explaining that. And we always say, demonstrate, do not explicate. And if you're going to sit there and you're going to explicate that, and there's different ways to explicate things. Okay. So you can just say that, but then there's there's these sudden personality shifts that are disingenuous and inauthentic for that guy. And so you've been a beta for the last 10 or 12 years, and then suddenly you are an alpha guy. No, that's not how it works. No. Because just as progressive as you were when you went from alpha to beta, you need to take the steps to go from beta to a more alpha dominant masculine. You need to demonstrate that in your behavior. You need to demonstrate that shift in your brain. And I think a lot of guys can actually can get away with this if they're, say, like, maybe they're like, I'm about to be 50. If I was in a bad relationship, I could certainly use my turning 50 as sort of the catalyst to, blame I'm going to the gym now and I'm going to go do this. I can sort of blame it on, me having more insight at a particular age, or maybe something significant happened in my life and that's going to change me as well. But I think that making those changes need to, one of the reasons that I say guys need to break up with their wives is because they need to break themselves out of the idea that they're doing this change for their wives. Okay. That's what I was talking about before, is like most guys they'll want to stay in the marriage and they want to do whatever they can to make things right and to make that right there is why you will never do it, because you're making the change for her. You're not making the change for you. And it needs to be intrinsically rewarding. It needs to be something that works for you. So even if, let's just say, you make all of these positive changes for yourself, you go red pill, you become more dominant, and she has no appreciation whatsoever for you. Okay. You need to be able to tell yourself, I'm still a better person now than I was before when I decided to make this change. And that's why I tell guys, you need to break up with her and have that mentality, because that will put you in the frame of mind where you're making those changes for yourself and not for her. Because if you're making those changes for her, it's disingenuous. And eventually all that act will come back and to haunt you. In fact, you'll make your relationship worse for having done that if you cave later for doing that.
God, it's always worse.
Yeah. So first of all, you wake up, you have to ask yourself, where am I? What have I been doing? How did I get to here, basically? Then you need to say, okay, do I want to stay with this woman, or do I need to just simply get out? And then even after you answer that question, you need to get out. You still need to get out, whether you're going to stay married and try to make it work, or you need to get out on your own and go, apply your commitment to yourself rather than to the marriage. But let's say you want to stay in there. That commitment to yourself now has to be in terms of yourself and putting yourself as your mental point of origin. Most of the guys that get into this position have always had women as their mental point of origin, and not themselves as their mental point of origin. And that's one of the biggest discrepancies I have with Peterson and his sacrificial kind of stuff, is that puts other people on the pedestal and not yourself.
Right.
Not making yourself your first order of business. That's not to say be selfish and be a dick and be an asshole or anything like that. That means I'm going to put the oxygen mask on me before I'm going to put it on you, because I can't help you until I can help myself. But most guys, and it's a fucking crime today, because it's young boys as young as 4 and 5 years old are taught to be just like little girls, and they're taught they're taught like they're defective girls, right?
Yes.
They're not taught like boys, and what they are taught is that they are to loathe their own gender and to take themselves off of that pedestal and put women and womankind and girls on that pedestal. And to like their point, whenever something comes up, their first thought should never be about themselves. It should only be about girls and women and how it's going to affect them. Now flash forward. So you go from 5 years old and now you're 50 years old and you're awakened while married. Most likely for the last, 45 years, you have been putting womankind as your mental point of origin. So that's a real tough shift the older you get. Like, it's one thing to go through that shift when you're 30. It's a whole nother thing to do it when you're 60. And I've got a guy right now, and I won't mention names. I got a guy right now who's 70 years old who has been awakened while married. And I'm talking to this guy. I'm trying to, work with him and what's a guy got? Maybe another 10, 15, 20 years if he's lucky.
Sure.
Right? But even still, you can still live a better life for the rest of your life if you're red pill aware and you're in that situation, and you can still make these decisions and you can still assess where you've been and where it is that you want to go, even if you've only got 10 or 20 years left.
Rollo, it has been a pleasure, man. As usual, you dropped absolute truth bombs in here. The guys love you. Guys, listen. I mean, if you don't follow this guy on Twitter, you guys need to. And listen, you guys have to bookmark his website, therationalmale.com. I've got that linked in the description of this particular video. I've also got the link for his books on Amazon. The original, The Rational Male, then of course, Positive Masculinity, as well as Preventative Medicine, both parts 1 and 2. If any, and a lot of guys, gentlemen, they always ask, well, hey, I just found the red pill. Where should I start? My answer is always The Rational Male. Rollo, as always, I greatly appreciate you making the time for us tonight. Listen, this was a great episode. If you ever start a podcast, I'm at your disposal, my friend. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on our little get-togethers every other Saturday these days, and it's good to have I want to have like a depth of speakers on there so we can all sort of talk about different things.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to make it sort of a Red Pill All-Stars kind of chat type thing.
There you go.
And again, if anybody wants to get a hold of me for that, you can give me on Twitter. It's Rollo Tomassi at Rational Male. And I'm always open to questions. I'm probably the most accessible of the 3 R's of the Manosphere. So please, and it's funny you should say a podcast. I really don't have any designs to do my own podcast right now because I'm doing yours, and I'm doing. I'm going to be I'm going to be doing Reverend Jesse Peterson's pretty soon.
Okay.
He's good. I got there's sooner or later the bit I did with Stefan Molyneux is coming up too. And I'm always doing stuff with Pat Campbell on his radio show. I'm hoping to do a little bit more terrestrial radio as well this year. But,
I'm actually going to get into. I'm actually going to be getting into not into the terrestrial, radio game, but I'm going to have a weekly segment on a particular show, and that will certainly I'll make that announcement here soon. Rollo, again, thank you very much for making time for us, and we will see you soon, my friend.
Great, thanks.